So, welcome everyone. So I'm going to run through the features for the 2017 R1 release. So to start with, we'll run through translators. I'm not going to run through every single change that we've done through the translators for this release. The things that jumped out for me were the SolidWorks support for the graphics PMI information. Could be useful for anybody getting models off customers using SolidWorks. As normal, at the time of release, all our translators are going to be at the latest releases of other products. If you want to have a look at in more depth of what level of translators we've got, if I just move on to the next slide. Okay, so this chart will give you a rundown of the level of translators we're at. This is available through the system help, so you'll be able to look through the system documentation if you need to check. Really, the thing to stress with translators, if you get any files that you've got problems, we need to see those files to be able to investigate what the problem is. So please let us have the data that you're having trouble with. If you're spending hours and hours to repair data, that shouldn't be the case. There should be things we can do to improve that. So yeah, any poor data that you import, just let us know. But it's a constant battle with translators. So the one thing that is linked to the translators, which we have done, which is worth pointing out, is anyone using the batch converter. We've done some work on the batch converter. Previously, with the batch converter, you got what you were given. You picked on a file and it imported the data with whatever settings were set in the main system. You couldn't change the import settings when you imported a group of files. So we've now added a couple of more buttons within the batch converter interface just to be able to set up import settings for individual file formats. So if you're importing a range of different files, you can click on the import library that you're importing, and it'll give you a settings list so you can configure the import to give you the best results, and you can set up a range of the different files that you're importing. So there's a couple of improvements there just to give us the best achievable results using the batch converter. So moving on, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a number of slides, and then there'll be a movie just showing how to use the new functions that are available in a more practical method. So I'll go through these as quickly as I can. I'll try not to bore anyone too much. So starting with the interface, the drawing style manager. Again, this is a function that's been available for a long time, but there's now a new dockable interface. It's a lot easier to use, to be honest, than it was before, and it's a lot easier to adjust geometry on the fly as you're creating things. So it saves us having to create geometry and then go and change attributes afterwards. You're more inclined to do it as you're creating the geometry. And there's a few new functions as well being incorporated inside this to be able to set working layers and create geometry and have them automatically be created on certain layers and things like that. So you'll see that in a second on the movie. And anyone using the element selection option, there's a new chain selection button. You can see it's just highlighted there on the left. So it's a new icon. It's used for selecting or chain selection of wireframe geometry, so either profile, segments, arcs, curves, polylines, or a combination of any of these. So as long as they're in contact, you can pick a long chain of these using the angular deviation option. And if you get geometry which branches, so you get a choice of going either 1, 2 or 3 or however many branches there are. You'll get a selection list, so you can choose which branch you take to choose your chain of geometry. So it saves us, in theory, we don't have to chain, or we don't have to group select stuff, or we don't have to concatenate curves together before using modeling functions. So it saves us that hassle of having to concatenate things. So let's move on. So we've done a bit of work inside the settings option. There's a new tab now for configuring mouse buttons. So there's also some improved customization for mouse settings. The idea of this is really to provide users, or anybody who's using more than one system, because it's inevitable that every different system uses a different mouse configuration to manipulate the data, pan, zoom in, zoom out, and it can get somewhat frustrating and confusing when you keep jumping from one system to another. So, because we're all about trying to reduce frustration, what we've done is put another option in here to be able to control the defaults that you're using for your mouse configurations for moving your geometry. So there's 3 sort of main options. You've got the custom, which allows you to configure it exactly as you want, or you've got a Vero option, which makes the settings the same as our other products within the Vero group, or you can have the Visi historical settings, which are the same as they've always been. And also the mouse configuration has been extended to provide us more functionality when we're rotating and moving geometry. So you can rotate upon a cursor position or the center of the screen, or actually just keep rotating around the geometry that's on the screen. And also the pan screen, you've always been able to pan the geometry using just the mouse alone, but you've always had to sort of take your fingers off certain buttons and you press the middle mouse button and the left mouse button, and it's been a bit awkward. So we've changed it now, so you can, just pressing the left mouse button and the right mouse button together, you can pan the geometry around the screen. So so it's a bit more comfortable to have to move geometry in that manner. Picking, so anyone who uses the pre-select environment, you're now possible to select solid geometry. Now this is particularly useful if you're using the click and drag option. Before, you could do this in the 2016, but you had to change the element filter to be able to get the result to work. So if you didn't know you had to do that, you wouldn't have been able to select a solid in the pre-select. So you wouldn't have been able to pick a solid and then have just the functions available on the right mouse click to provide functionality to that solid. So you don't have to do that now. So you can pick a solid by just picking on the vertex in the corner or any edge, and you'll be able to pick a solid and also incorporate the click and drag. Regarding the click and drag function, there's a bit more functionality that's been added. So if you're dragging geometry from one place to another, and you've got the solid shading on, sometimes it's difficult to pick an anchor location. So if you press the W key now, it'll enable and disable the wireframe preview. So if the solid shading's on, the piece you're moving will then be put into a wireframe shading option, so it makes it easier to select an anchor position. And if you're copying the geometry just a small distance, the geometry that you're copying might get in the way and you're picking the wrong position. So if you can press the H key and it'll just hide and show the original geometry. So just little functions that make the click and drag a bit easier to use. Now, anyone using the there's within the enhanced pick, there's an added ability that it's the video will show this better than I'll probably describe it now, to be honest. But if you're adding dimensions or you're creating geometry using the freehand option, this next function will help you position it and rounding the figures up to significant figures. So if you're freehand picking somewhere and you're not using a grid and you want to reference the anchor point of the geometry you're creating back to an origin position, but you don't want it to have lots of significant figures, what you can do is you can type in R space 0 and it'll position the geometry you're creating exactly to no significant figures. So if you wanted it 10 millimeters from a distance from somewhere, it'll go exactly 10 millimeters and not 10.23456 millimeters. And it works well with dimensions as well, so it'll round up dimensions and it'll save you having to go into the settings for that dimension value and keep adjusting the significant figures within the dimensions you're placing. And if you were to type in R space 1, for instance, you'd get 1 significant figure, and so forth. So you'll see this in the video. It'll hopefully make more sense in the video when you see it being used. Regarding the graphics, there's a new function that's been added into the Windows drop-down menu, which is switch between wireframe and shading. So basically it's a one-button selection. So if you press the button, and if you're in shading mode, it'll go into wireframe, and if you press it again, it'll go from wireframe into shading. And using this as well, you can use this one function then to add it into your quick keys and have a single key then just to be able to switch between your shading and wireframe modes. So in case of instead of having different button selections, you can just have one key that will flick between the two. And also with 2017, when you open Visi, it'll remember what shading mode you were in. So if you look to do all your modeling in your solid shaded mode, when you next open Visi 2017, you won't have to, the first thing we would have had to do previously was always turn the shading on, but you don't have to do that now. So whatever shading mode you're in when you shut the system, it'll remember that next time you open it. And lastly on this page is a new function, and basically it's if you hit the space bar anytime that you've got some geometry on the screen, it'll zoom in on the cursor position. So this is particularly useful if you've got a big volume of data, or a large component or a large design with a lot of components in, and you've imported this from somebody else and you're not familiar with it. It just allows us to move the cursor around the screen, and you can hit the space bar and you'll zoom in to the position where the cursor is, and once you release the space bar, it'll zoom back out to the original cursor position or the original zoom factor. If you want to keep the zoom factor, all you need to do is press the Alt key when you're in the zoom. So if you hit the space bar and zoom in on the geometry you want, if you then press the Alt key, it'll keep that zoom factor, so it won't zoom out again when you release the mouse button, not the mouse button, the space key. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these functions in action. Okay, so I'm just going to create a line now, and at the bottom here you've got some options to be able to change the line style. So these are preset, but if I left mouse on those, you can see it comes up with this new interface for being able to change your defaults. And you can leave this open while you're doing your modeling and change defaults and values as you're creating geometry. So if I just change the defaults here, so if I change the color, if I change the line thickness, line style even, and just shut the interface so I don't need to accept it. But next time I create some geometry, the defaults are then set to the new styles that I've set. So a different scenario is if I create a solid here, so the default solid color is grey. So if I change the attributes of that, so if I'll change the color, change the edge thickness. Okay, so if I open up the style manager, come down to solid, so use a filter, and there's only one solid option. So if I create another solid, you'll see that the default is still the grey. But if I want to quickly change, we can say select an element, I'll pick a piece of geometry, and it'll set then the default to match it basically. So the next piece of geometry will match that geometry. So that could be colour, it could be edge, and there you go, I'll set it back to the original. Okay, so another scenario is I can set geometry to be automatically assigned to different layers. So if I click dimensions, I want dimensions to go onto a dimension layer. And for solids, what I'm going to do is I want to create some new additional default values. So I'll add in a top, and I'll add in a second one for bottom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have different colours for these different solid default colours, and also I'm going to have the different solids go onto different layers. So I'm going to say top insert for the top, set bottom, I'll change the colour to green, set that to go onto index 12. Right, and so let's turn on all my layers. So I've got all the layers on, and what I'll do is I'll start with just the default, and that's the system default, and I'll click on top, create another solid. You see the colours different. I'll click on the bottom, that's green, and I'll also add some dimensions. So now if I go to the layers, you'll see that the orange is on the top, green is on the bottom, and the dimensions are on the dimension layers. So the management of these defaults and changing the variables on the fly is a lot better than it was. Okay, so this is the new chain selection. So you can see I've got a group of elements chaining along, then none of these are concatenated. So if I pick the first one, right click, it'll pick along the chain to the angular deviation that I set. So I'm just using the change attributes as a selection function. So if I do that again, this time using the shift look, I get a list so I can choose which path I take. So with each branch I get the option to choose which direction to take. If I just turn on some dimensions, you can see the angular deviation between the elements. So there's 25 degrees there, and I'm using an angular deviation of 26. So you can see there's a line up here at 29 degrees, so it won't pick up to that, or it'll only pick the branches up to that element. So you need to ensure that the angular deviation is set high enough to choose the chain that you want to select along. So as well as pressing shift, you can also tick the tick box to choose alternatives. That'll just give you a list of alternatives on the screen at every branch intersection. So if I set that higher up, you should pick the branch all the way along there. Okay, so that's just an example, but let's have a look at a more practical example. So for this piece of geometry I imported, didn't give the best results on the split line creation, mainly because the geometry is pretty poor. So if I just look at the curves that got generated, look, there's plenty of branches in there. So I don't necessarily want to go through the hassle of deleting all of those branches. I don't want to go through the hassle of concatenating everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some runoff surfaces. Using the chain selection, look, you can see I'm getting options and I can choose which direction I go in. Just confirm that. It gives me a nice sweeping runoff surface without me having to. So it just gets rid of concatenation, and so quite a useful function when you get used to using it. Okay, this is just to show the new settings tab. So this is for the mouse key. So you can see you've got custom and Vero. So if you pick the system set ones, basically you don't get the option to adjust anything. They're already preset. Or if you select the custom option, you get to change your options. So just to show, the middle mouse button for rotating is, you've got some additional options. So this one's rotate on the geometry, so it's always going to rotate around the geometry you have on the screen. Okay, rotator on the cursor position. Okay, I obviously like that one because I filmed that one a lot. Or you can rotate on the screen center. And just to show the pan, and I'm just pressing the left and right mouse buttons together. Okay, so this is the result from 2016 R2. You can see I can't pick the solid. I can't pre-select the geometry. So I can't use the pre-select function. And if I try and use the window, I've got to be really careful the way I use the window selection. So this is the same with 2017. You can see once I put the cursor on the corner of a solid, I can right mouse click and it'll give me a list of functions that I can use with that solid. So this is the drag and drop. So now I can put the cursor over a solid, it'll pick that solid, and then I can just drag and drop the solid somewhere in different locations. If I press the W key, you can see it turns off the shading just for the piece of geometry that I'm moving. Just makes it easier to pick an anchor point. You can also press the H key just to hide the whole geometry. Okay, so this is the enhanced pick. So what I'm going to do is put some dimensions on for these holes that I've just freehand picked. You can see you've got 25.65, so there's two significant figures on the position of that hole. So if I add the dimension on again, if I insert R space and 0 and press enter, you can see it'll round the figure up to get rid of the significant figures for that dimension. This works for dimensioning, it works for positioning geometry. So if I use this option when I actually positioned the hole, you would have positioned it to however many significant figures I specified. So I'll just use a different function. If I just put on a 3D note, again if I pick the center position, so that's the original default. If I do it again, so R space 0, it's important to remember the space. If you don't put the space in, you don't get this result. Okay, so I'll put one significant figure in this time. Okay, just another option for picking geometry. Okay, this is just the single or the new option for turning on the shading. So switch between wireframe and shading. So you just press the option, it just flicks between the two. Okay, someone's got their microphone on, so let's just turn that off. Okay, so you can set this option then within the quick key. So you can set a single key. So I'm just going to press use the Alt and S key to switch on the shading. So I just need to restart. the geometry again. You can see it keeps the shading on. If I press the Alt and S key, it just flicks between the shading on and off. Okay, so if I turn the shading on, shut the system's going to remember whatever shading option I'm in. So if I create any new geometry, it'll always be in the shaded mode. Okay, so this is the zoom in. So I'm just hitting the space bar on the keyboard, and it zooms in on the location for the. So as long as I keep my finger on the space bar, it'll keep zoomed in. Unless I press the Alt key, and then it'll zoom in and stay on that zoom factor, and you can zoom in again then. Okay, so that's that. So moving on, back to the slides. The change attributes. There's a new tab, or there'll be a new tab available within the change attributes interface. It'll allow us to interact with the assembly manager data. So basically, if you've got a solid and you want to apply assembly manager data to it, you can do that on the fly using the change attributes. It's quite important to highlight to you though that if you were to create a new solid, and if you go into the change attributes, if you don't have the assembly manager up to date, so if it's not been refreshed, you won't have this properties tab within the change attributes interface. So you'll see this in the movie in a second, but what you'll need to do is if you created new geometry since last updating the assembly manager, you have to go into the assembly manager, just refresh the interface, and then you can go back to the change attributes, and you'll see the properties tab where you can go and add assembly manager data. Now there's a new option within the extrude elements tab or function. You can see it's highlighted there. It's called extrude as text. Now it does exactly what it says on the tin. So previously, whenever we were using the extrude function on text profiles, it would have, for any letter or number where you have like a 0, where you have a hole in the text, if you like, we would have created two solids, one for each profile, and to get the required result of text either extruded or embossed into a part, we would have had to manually subtract the inner part of the text from the outer part. Now what this new option it'll do that automatically. So when you extrude text geometry, it'll automatically subtract the inner profile from the outer one. Now it's a bit unfortunate the name of this function, because it implies it only works on text, which isn't strictly true. Any profile where you've got profiles internally of outer profiles, so you've got more than one profile around each other, this function will work, and you'll see this in the movie. In the last release we added some functionality to the subtract function to be able to keep sides, or you could decide which side to keep. So if you had a solid model and you had a sheet body subdividing it, you could go into the options and decide when you're using the subtract function how you wanted to keep the geometry. So you could either keep the front side, the back side, or none at all. But a bit frustrating, because if you wanted to keep both sides, you had to run this function twice. So within the subtract now, within the options, there's a keep both sides option being added, which again reduces that frustration of having to run this function more than once. Within the blends and chamfer functions, there's a new tolerance management option. Now this is particularly useful if you're putting a chain of blends or chamfers along geometry that's been imported from another modeling system, and if it's a particularly poor model, and if it's got different tolerance, if the faces are united or using different tolerances, sometimes you can basically get no result. So this allows you to fiddle with the tolerance when you're creating a chain of radiuses or chamfers, and hopefully get a result where previously you wouldn't have done. So it saves you having to go in and repair poor data to the extent just to add a few radiuses onto a model. And also for the chamfer function, we've added an advanced tab with some more functionality within there for creating chamfers. So let's have a look at these. So this is just a simple mold tool. You can see here that model there has got a properties tab, and you can see the options available. So if I create a new solid, if I come back into the change attributes, you can see there's no properties tab available. So in these scenarios, what you have to do is you need to come into Assembly Manager and just click on the update button here. That then adds in that model into the interface. That's all you have to do. So now when I go back into the change attributes, you can see the properties option is available. So let's just delete that solid. Let's go into this piece here. So if I come in and just add some properties onto this particular model, so I come into the properties, I can add a description. So I can add it from a drop down list. So if you've got some default names, you can add those in. You can type in your own on the fly. So this addition just allows us to manage our parts list data on the fly, really, and not have you don't have to leave it as the last task in a design job. So we can select options from a drop down. We can go and put a bounding box, so measure the geometry automatically. So I won't add a supplier, and I'll have no code because it's a manufactured part. So I accept that. So all those details are now going to be assigned to that solid. And if I come back to the Assembly Manager, you can see the name has been updated, and all the values I've added have been added into the Assembly Manager. So this is a two-way solution. So if you still want to add in your data using the Assembly Manager, you can do that. So if I just change the attribute for this, call it a water insert, if I come back, you'll see that data is available to the user through the change attributes window as well. So this is the extrude then, so the text. So I've got some text here. If I select and extrude that geometry, this is the result we would have got, and we can still get, to be honest, inside 2017. So you can see it creates a solid for each profile I have within my text, and I would have had to subtract the inner solid from the outer solid, which is a bit of a nuisance, especially if you're doing this a lot. So to minimize the need to use this secondary function, so if I extrude this again, now if I come and click on this extrude as text, it'll automatically subtract that inner profile solid from the outer one. So that's the desired result. Just saves me having to use that secondary function. So if I just change the direction of the solid, and if I subtract it, you can see it's embossed it into the component now. But the result can change depending upon how many profiles you have. So if I put a additional profile around the text, so window select the function or window select the text again, you can see you get a different result.
So the name of this option is a bit unfortunate because it works not just on text, it works on any profile. So if I just create some more profiles here if I start with a solid, if I just offset that profile, it gives me 2 profiles, and if I create some more geometry internally as well, let's just put another one on as well. So if I come and extrude that geometry, okay, so you can see the different solutions you get. Now if I wanted it all as solids, I just need to go to extrude as body. If I add more profiles in, you get a different result again. Just remember, the outer profile will always be a solid, and any profile internally, the next profile in will be subtracted, and the third profile will be a solid again, and so forth. Okay, so subtract. Now this is always dependent upon the order that you pick the geometry in. So if I pick subtract and pick the surface and then the solid, it subtracts it from the sheet. Whereas if I click the options on there, pick the surface and then the solid, and this is what we had before. So if I wanted both sides, I would have had to run this function twice. So we've added this both sides option in now. If I just change the colour, you can see it creates a sheet body for both sides. Just saves us running that function twice. Okay, so general modelling changes. You're now able to use the right mouse button to confirm curves, polylines, pretty much any modelling function. Now, I think this is probably one of the biggest things, especially for me as a user. I tend to right mouse click all the dialog boxes, and I don't use the tick box that's on the screen. I don't like having to keep navigating over to the OK button to accept dialog boxes. I'm constantly right mouse clicking to accept results. Now, frustratingly, some of the older functions didn't necessarily allow you to do this, so we've done a bit of work now to be able to confirm pretty much all the functions now using a right hand mouse button. Just a small change within the delete and extract faces. We've made a number of changes in this interface over the last few releases, but just to point out really that the default setting will be, when you open this function, it'll be set to delete and heal. This seems to be the function that most people use this function for, so that will be set for the default when you open this function. And the last option here is just we've improved the dynamic query point selection. So when you use this dynamic query point, you get a bit more data within the data box. So you get the point coordinates, and also if it's a solid you're selecting, you'll get a bounding box. So you'll get A, B and C values giving you the bounding box size for the geometry that you're selecting. Also then we've done a bit of work. It's been a bit of a long time coming, to be honest. Quite a few people have asked for this in the past. Within the assembly manager, we've done some work to improve the results for the auto ballooning. The positioning's been the problem really with the auto ballooning, so we've done a bit of work on positioning and also added a bit more functionality. So we've got the ability now to create auto balloons on 4 sides of a view you can still pick whether you want them in just X or Y directions. But now the ballooning is a lot better positioned, and you can also specify whether they're positioned from the just given the using the shortest distance for the ballooning. So you get a few more options within the settings. So within the settings options, you can tick on options to be able to avoid duplicate balloons, just to minimize the amount of balloons that are being added on a view, and also avoid overlapping balloons as well. So the last option is just to add element position numbers using the user field option within the assembly manager. These will hopefully make more sense when you look at the movie. Just to point out really that within the plot view, also the thread representation, we didn't achieve the best results, especially if you were using the feature manager to put a feature in, especially if you're putting it in on a cylindrical or like a chamfered face. Within the plot view, the results weren't necessarily representative on every occasion, but we've done a lot of work now and there as you would expect. Again, the movie will show you the two solutions, and basically take any geometry that you've created in 2016 and how to update it in 2017 to give the correct results. Just to point out then, the outbreak view, a function that was added last release. The engine to calculate this has been improved, and now when we select a point, it gives us automatically gives us the reference dimension to be able to create the breakout view. So as you move the cursor around your selected position, it gives you different dimensional values so you can that are automatically added into the interface to create the breakout view. So you'll see this in use in a second. So quickly spinning through the plot view, so added ability to outbreak. So as well as these values for the outbreak view being automatically added, when you come to adjust them, so if you were to come in and change the view properties of an outbreak view, you can adjust them in the same sort of manner, and it gives you this automatic selection when you come and pick a position from the plot view. So some additional settings and additional values that have been added into the plot view interface. So the ability to load paper sizes in multiple view creation. So previously you'd have every plot view page, you had to set the page yourself, but now you can sort of set a default and it'll automatically add all your automatic views onto a paper size that you specify. And the paper layout, you can specify between landscape and portrait in multiple view creations. If you're doing multiple view creation and using the automatic option, you can specify how many views are shaded, so you don't have to do that as a secondary function. The save data option, so there's two functions within the edit drop down list: save data and merge data. Now these have been historically in Visi for a while now, useful for copying data between databases without having to save it to your hard disk, but we haven't been able to do this with plot view data and wireframe data. So now within the plot view drop down, there's two new options which allow you to save data to the RAM and then merge it into other databases or other plot view windows. It's important just to, if you use this function to copy between plot view pages, it's just important to remember that it's liable to break the link between the model geometry. Management of mirrored text. So previously, if we were to mirror some geometry and it had text within that view, it would mirror the text as well. But a lot of feedback we were getting was they don't necessarily want that. So what the system will do now is it'll mirror it, but it will keep the text in a readable orientation. So let's see these in action. So I'll start with the automatic ballooning. So within the parts list option, if I click on the automatic ballooning, so you can see their 4-way option. So I'll turn that on, confirm it, gives me a distance. So I pick a point and it adds in a lot of, so depending on how busy your view is, depending upon which settings you need set. So if I come into the parts list settings, into the global area, so you can see in here avoid duplicate balloons. So if I tick that on, so if I've got multiple elements within the view, it won't balloon them more than once. You can see the results are a lot better, so no overlapping. So if I create another view on this second view up here, again still a lot of dimensions. If I come back into the settings and say, right, I want balloons to use a direct line this time, so I'll add on some balloons again to this second view. You see the layout's a bit better, but notice they are overlapping a little bit. Really, this is just to highlight that we've got a lot more ability now to be able to adjust the positions after the balloons have been created. So if I just grab these balloons, look, you can see I'll just double click them to be able to edit them, and then I can position them where I want and then confirm the position with a right hand mouse button. So it's a lot more user friendly than it was in previous releases, to be able to adjust positions after the automatic creation of balloons. And another thing to point out is I can delete these independently. They're not seen as a group of balloons together, so I can delete them using a window selection or individually. Okay, so this is just adding some settings in. So if I create a new field within the assembly manager, if I link in the item number for all the parts list, so if I add that in, so you can see I've got item number now within the properties for my model geometry, and you can see within the parts list I've got all position numbers already assigned to a lot of the components. So the new option is, if you right click, you can say copy position to user field. So there's my user field that I created. So I'll add those positions, so you can see that all the positions are now added into that user field, and that can be any geometry into any user field you wish. So this is a plot view result from, you can see you've got some tapped holes there going into a cylindrical face, and it looks fine within the solid environment. And this is the result from 2016. So if I put a section right down the center of those tapped holes, you can see that the tapping lines that we put in weren't necessarily trimmed correctly or entered correctly, depending upon the model geometry. So this is the result from the same model in 2017. So it's exactly as you'd expect the geometry to be. Now, this is a model that's been created in 2016, and the plot view's been created. So the plot view is basically wrong, but I've opened this now in 2017. So rather than recreate the plot view, what I can do is, if I come into the feature manager, I'll come into the options, come down to validate, pick the solid model. It's attempted to, or it's fixed the attributes for that model. I'll come back to the plot view. If I now just update the plot view, it'll correct all the tapping holes for that feature. Okay, so back to the plot view and settings. So if we look at an outbreak view, so before I would have had to type in an outbreak depth manually, but now I can, if I right click where it says depth value, I can choose a position and it will automatically measure to the bounding box of that view. So if I accept that value there, you can see the depth is automatically been added, so 122. And if I come and create a window now for my breakout view, so I pick the view, create a polyline window, and there we go. So saves us having to use measurement functions before creating any outbreak views. So likewise, if I need to modify one, if I come to view properties, pick the outbreak view that's been created, you can see here the outbreak view is in the section tab. If I click on that little button there at the side, it gives me the options to be able to reposition the outbreak view. So I'll move this a bit further up the model, so it automatically measures it, adds the value in, select OK, and it updates the view straight away. So that makes that outbreak a bit more easy to use. So now I've got a couple of views already created. I've put them on A0 sheets, but what I want to do is I want to create individual drawings now for the rest of the components. So you can see here, if I come to the multi-view or multi-page, you've got multi-view options and you've got shade view options now available. So I can create one of the views as shaded. I can also say I don't want to use the same page size, so I'm going to specify a page size. Also the landscape, and I'm also going to put a new mask to match the size of page that I've selected, and also make the views automatically scale to fit that page. So if I select the green tick to create all those pages, it goes off, creates all the pages. You can see these pages have now been created automatically. They're all on A2 sheets, which I specified. You can see the view there has been shaded in now. So there's a bit more within the settings just to save us having to do things as secondary options. So here's the save data and merge data. So these weren't available in previous releases, not within the plot view. So now if I go to a different database, I can just come in, use the edit and merge data. Just a case of remembering that is no longer linked now to the model geometry, but I can add it into the modeling view, or I can add it into the plot view. So what I'm going to do with this scenario here is I'm going to mirror this view. So if I pick the geometry with the text, so if I just mirror it through that point there, you'll see it mirrors the text. But when I accept this result, it'll flip the text just to make it readable. And it's still text, so if I come and edit the text, you can see I can change the text and just put in left view. I can dissolve it, and if I wish to have it as reverse text, I can still achieve that as well. Okay, so some differences or some additions we've added to the annotation functions. Anyone using the chamfer dimension, it always used to put in quite a few significant figures on the dimension, so we've added a bit or another variable to be able to specify in your settings how many decimal places you have, or how many significant figures after the decimal place you enter into that kind of dimension. Anyone using multiple dimension functions, you can now confirm them with the right mouse button. So this is going back to the function I said earlier. So if you use any of these multiple dimension functions, previously you would have pressed the right hand mouse function to confirm or tell the system you'd finished dimensioning, and then it just gave you an option saying, do you want to finish this dimension? So you had to do it twice in essence, which has got a bit annoying, but so now you can just right mouse click and it'll take you straight out of the function. And if you're using the dimension for creating multiple points, you can now select by a window to delete any points that you've selected. You could do them. You could remove points before, but you had to do them sort of one at a time. You couldn't use the window selection. So if you had a number of points you needed to remove from a dimension you created, it became a bit time consuming. So now it's just be aware that you can go in window select and remove as many as you like. And within the text interface, so when you're creating text, there's a new tick box just to be able to specify whether you want to create text in its correct orientation, or you can click this new option to mirror it. So you can mirror or enter text in a mirrored orientation. So if you're doing engraving and things like that, that's useful. Just a few things on the electrode, just to highlight those. There's a new option called Define Electrode. Just a new tick box within the settings and within the electrode creation. It allows us to import geometry from other systems. So if you've already modeled something in, or somebody else has already created an electrode, what you can do is you can select that geometry, tick this tick box, and let the system know that that geometry is an electrode. So it'll automatically move it to an electrode layer. It'll automatically add in an origin for the manufacturing of that electrode, and you can then link that electrode geometry to your electrode manager. So it doesn't look much, it's just a tick box, but it's got a useful function if you're handling data from other sources as well. There's a new algorithm being added, or an improved algorithm for calculating the erosion data. So if you're reliant on the projected area being calculated for you and the erosion area data, it was very dependent previously on the quality of the model. So if you had a poor model, these values weren't always calculated. So we've worked on the algorithm to ensure a greater degree of success for this calculation. So that works much better. And also, when you're extracting model geometry to create electrodes, if you've got face colors assigned to a model, and you want those face colors assigned to the electrode, you can that can automatically be done now. So if you've got it's good for highlighting just cavity geometry, so you can know where shut-off faces are and distinguish between the two on the electrode. So let's have a look at this. So I'll add on a chamfer dimension. So this would have been the default result, and you can see there's 3 significant figures there. So if I come to the local dimension parameters, come down to chamfer, just change the number of decimal places. So I don't know how many people actually manufactured chamfers to 3 significant figures, but that looks a bit more realistic. So I'll put on some dimensions, some multiple dimensions. Okay, so let's put on some of these hole positions. So now to confirm that, I just right mouse click, and you can see it doesn't come up with an additional option. It just comes straight out of the function, and I can carry on with the second set of dimensions I wish to add. So I'll just use a different method now, and again right mouse click, and it confirms the dimension. So if I use the point dimension, so if I just add on some point dimensions for these different hole positions. Okay, so if I need to, so I'll just accept that. If I need to adjust them, if I double click on it, I hit the minus button and I can select using a window multiple points. Before I'd have had to select them individually and then keep going back to the minus key to remove them one at a time. So this is just to show the mirrored text. So I've added one text on. If I want to add the second one as a mirror, so it's just a new tick box. So this is quickly just going to show the electrode. So within the electrode settings, stock general, you can see there's a new define electrode option. So I'll tick that on. What I'll do is I'll create an electrode, but not using the electrode manager to actually create the model geometry. So if I just create a cube to start with, just make it a bit bigger. If I cavity that now to give me the shape. Okay, so there's still a bit of adjustment to do. So if I just cut out this piece, get rid of that, just extrude that, I'll move that up to there, unite that together. Okay, so I've got my electrode. Now if I add stock to that, but now I've got the define electrode ticked on, so it doesn't try and add any stock to it because I've already modeled it. If I apply that now, look, it'll add that model geometry to an electrode layer. The origin's been created for the manufacturer. So this is just making the use of the face colors. So if I put a window to select the face or the colors or the faces that I want to use for my electrode. By default, look, it's not, or the way I've got my default set, it doesn't use the face colors. But that's mainly because I've got on this cut at minimum. If I turn that off, now you can see it's extracting all the face colors from the model geometry. So it just allows me to see cavity geometry or feature geometry depending on what face colors I've got selected. So this could aid us in the future if I need to modify electrodes and you've got face colors selected. It could aid us selecting certain geometry. So if I just adjust this electrode, if I get rid of those red faces, so if I use the delete and heal, use the face colors, just window select that, get rid of that geometry. So there's a number of scenarios that this could be useful. There you go, finished electrode, add the stock. Just to highlight here the erosion data. So like I say, the algorithm to calculate this has been improved a lot, so it's not so dependent upon the quality of the model that you're creating electrodes from. Okay, so anybody using the mold, there's a new function within the drop-down list within the mold. It's linked to the part definition that we added in the last release, which links into the flow calculations. Okay, so the part definitions give you a very broad flow calculation depending on a material selection and how many gates you've put on, but it gives you an idea of what cycle times are and holding times are required for a component. The new option in this case is called cooling validation, and it allows us to check our cooling circuits and their impact upon the mold design. So again, it's functionality from the flow analysis. It doesn't need any flow licenses. It's very easy to set up. It allows us to, it takes automatically takes geometry from any design geometry that you've already got. So if you've got an insert, it'll automatically extract the cooling lines from that solid insert. Or if you've just got them modeled using the mold cooling function, it'll automatically take that. And we can also create a report just to see how efficient our cooling lines are. So it's valuable feedback for any tool designers. Regarding the tool build for the mold, there's 2 new bill or suppliers been added. So Strack and Rubio have been added for tool builds. So those suppliers, anybody using those suppliers, they're now able to use the tool build for those. So let's just have a look at these new functions. So for this cooling function to be able to utilize this, you need first of all to use the part definition. So you need to do that to be able to create the mesh of the components and also specify a material that you're wishing to mold the part in. So that's all you need to do. So you don't need to do any more than that. Just accept the results. So if I just turn on an additional layer to give me some additional geometry. But if I come down to the mold and say, right, cooling validation, so this is the new function. You just pick mesh model, then it asks you, okay, what cooling lines do you want to investigate? So I'll pick both my models. It'll create, or it'll extract the geometry it needs. So you just need to pick the path, pick an entry and an exit. The same this time, it's finding the holes automatically. The selection process is the same. It'll automatically extract that data and prepare a calculation for me. So the model's ready for analysis. Comes up with an interface where we can interact. So I can choose what material the steel inserts are being made from. I can come into the cooling channels. I can link these together if I wish to. So if I'm running a single circuit, I can just drag and drop the circuits to add links in. I can specify cooling time, opening time, and so forth, so I can change all of these values. Okay, so it's just telling me to update. And then it's just a case of running the calculation. So you run that, let it do its business, and then when it finishes, if I just look at the component on its own, come back to the interface. So if I visualize the results, so you can look at the effect of those cooling channels on the material temperature. You can see how much of the component is solidified. You can look at the surface temperature of the steel. So you've got values to be able to adjust, to be able to change the range of the results. So that's how much. So the red areas there is 100% solid. So you've got surface temperature of the steel, helping to highlight any hot spots, seeing if you're too close with the cooling channels or whether they're just not being efficient enough. So you can put sections through the steel and see how good your cooling circuit design is. You can also create a report using this this option. So you can add default images. You can also then add in your own specific images and create a report to pass on to others if you're looking for some feedback. Okay, so moving on for the standard elements. This is the standard elements for both mold and progress. So we've constantly updating the libraries. We've updated the mold to in the following areas: so Moisberger, Haskell, Strack, and some others, Bruvio, and never even heard of the last one, to be honest. For progress, Moisberger, Strack, and Intercom, as well as adding new functions into new builders and into these manufacturers. We've done a lot of bug fixing and small enhancement on a large range of builders and other catalogs. Anybody using Cadenus, we now support up to version 9.07. At this point, I've been stressing that we need feedback. So if you come across any of the standard elements that don't work correctly, we rely really on your feedback to let us know which ones aren't working as they should be. There's so many elements now within the standard element library. We just rely upon your feedback to tell us either if the databases are wrong, or if the builders aren't working correctly, or if you come across scenarios where the builders aren't working correctly. We really need your feedback to be able to correct these things and put them right. Right, so moving on to progress. The next few functions are going to cover the sort of new functionality within the progress suite. Now this particular one sits within the Visi blank, and it calculates Springback, but it's important to highlight to you it's only available if you have the preview option available. So in the previous release we first released the waveform machining under the preview option, so some users may already have the preview license activated. If you don't and this functionality looks of interest, you must really speak to your sales representative to get them to or have a chat with them and get them to organise you getting a preview license, so you can test this or try this functionality out in this release. So when you're using a blank, you've got a number of new options within the Springback. So it calculates multiple models, so it creates mesh models of the blank, the original component, and the mesh and the Springback component. So calculating Springback of the part. It adds sorry, I need to turn some mics off again. So it'll automatically move this geometry onto different layers, and you can then use this mesh geometry if you've got the Springback ability to recalculate your model geometry to compensate for the Springback that's been calculated using this option. And you're guaranteed to have the same number of mesh elements, so it's you don't get problems that you sometimes get with scanned data and things. So it's a good option this for anybody who's interested in or has trouble with Springback. So moving on to the next option. This is another option that's only available under Springback, but it's more of a visualization option. It's called Safety Zone. It's actually available in a number of functions, so it's available in Visi blank, blank unfolding, the flange unfolding, and also the display results. And it allows you to visualize different manufacturing defects. So depending upon the color zoning on the that's projected onto the part, you can see whether a certain area is going to fail, or whether it's acceptable, or whether you're going to get strong tendency to wrinkle in certain areas. So depending upon your function, it provides you quite a bit of valuable information, and that's move on. So this is just giving you a breakdown of the different colors and what they represent. So anybody who's interested in this, again, you need a preview license to be able to run this and be able to visualize this. But if I show you the movie, you'll see these functions in action. So if I start with a blank, so the actual basic blank process is exactly the same as it normally is. So you pick the component, create a mesh of the component, and then create the blank. And then there's a new option called Springback. So you pick that, it creates meshes. It's very quick to calculate, and you can see it's created a mesh model with calculated Springback for the material that's been selected. So if I just run the calculation again, so I'm just putting some constraint on and then running the Springback again, that can change the results, so it's very quick. You can see there's multiple models, there are multiple layers. So you can see in here they automatically adds these other additional layers in. So if I just turn on a couple of layers that I need, so I've got two mesh models and the solid, or the sheet body of the original component there. So if I come and use the Springback function I've got available, what I can do is I can pick the two mesh models, pick the surface model geometry, and what this will do is it will remodel the sheet model to compensate for the Springback that's been calculated using the blank function. So you can see there, that's the new model that I've now compensated for the Springback. So if I now use that component for my tooling design, the component should be calculated, or should be correct. So this is just again showing a blank using a binder surface, just to show that it can be used for more complicated blanks as well. So this is just to show the safety zone now. So I've got a different component. I'm using it first of all with the blank. So I'll create the blank. And within the visualization options in here, so this is the original one. We now have a new option in here for the safety zone. You can see it's just highlighted a little area there that it's not happy about, and a few areas of wrinkle tendency. So if I come in, use a different function now. You can see a safety zone option in here. I'll use a flange and fold, so I'll pick it on just this one fold here. Just recalculate that flat. You can see it just gives me results just on that one operation. Do the same on the other side. So you can visualize the results before you accept the result if you wish. And then if I display all the results together, you can see there's a new option now within the tick box. It says safety zone, and it'll display the safety zone and create a report for you if you wish to export that to others. Okay, so moving on, we've done some work within the strip study. We've got an updated user interface for positioning multiple or two components within the strip. Positional adjustments are made from the graphics area, so you don't have to change all the values within the strip definition interface, and changing dialog boxes makes it a bit easier just to be able to have these movement options on the screen. They dynamically adjust the position on the screen on the fly. Makes it much easier just to play around with the positioning of components when you're creating a strip. Also within the strip study, there's some additional values being added for strip stress data. So you've got bend stress now and flange stress values within the interface, and it's another big thing for this release is previously you would have only got them for the entire strip, these sort of results. Now if you click on individual steps within the strip study, you'll get stress data for every individual step within the strip creation, and you're also able to export those results out to a report. And if you want to add in your own sort of safety factor, if you like, so if you want to round your figures up or down, you can go into overwrite the calculated values and export those out to a report if you want to add in a bit more safety value within the calculations. And then you've just got a reset button to reset the calculations that the systems give you. So let's have a look at this. So if I just create a quick study or strip study, so if I add in a second component into the strip, okay, so these you can see you've got on the screen adjustment options. So you can either just window select and use the roller ball to make adjustments. You can see the adjustments are made straight away. So it just makes it a bit easier to make adjustments. So you can either do it from the screen, or you can do it if you're used to the position of the values and making adjustments from the interface. You can make them from the dialog boxes here as well. So there's no right or wrong way really, it's whatever suits you. So if I just add some angles in, so the angle is independent, so I'll just change that one on the roller ball. Okay, so I'll accept that. So if I just create some punches, some automatically punches on that, and if I come and make some adjustments, so if I edit these, okay, so the punches are no longer correct, so if I just accept that. So if I just come into the strip, get rid of those punches and then just recalculate them. So within the strip study, so in here the strip stress data, you can see there's some additional values in here. These are all being calculated for the entire strip. If I pick on individual steps, you'll see that results are provided just for that individual step. So it depends whereabouts in the tree that you select, depends upon what results you get. So if I come back to the top and calculate the entire strip. So if I come down to the strip data, so if I create a HTML report, so that's the calculated data. So if I wish to adjust it and make my own and round figures up or down, I can come in and just overwrite the calculated results just simply by typing in a value into the interface. And then if I create a second HTML, it'll use those typed in values. And then if I wish to go back to the calculated values, I just need to tick the little box there with the 3 dots on, and it'll re-establish the calculated values. Okay, so moving on, insert management. So we've done a little bit of work, or quite a bit of work to be honest, regarding the insert manager, regarding the interface. We've added a bit more functionality, so you can now specify insert descriptions during the creation of any inserts. You can add in material and treatment data during the creation. You can dynamically on the screen adjust values for the size of geometry, and added functionalities to profile editing interface as well. So really added functionality to what we already had available within the insert manager. Now this is a new function. There were a couple of functions added in the last release, and this one slips in with those 2 functions that were added previously. So it sits within the progress and wire point menu, and this one's called wire point for punches. So if you've got a group of punches, it basically automatically adjusts or creates wire positions and wire data for the creation of those punches. So you can dynamically size and position and adjust positions of wire start points. You can individually or group parameter adjust, and it'll automatically provide wire geometry that is automatically passed onto the CAM functionality. You can now, within all of those 3 functions, the 2 that were last added in the last release, so the wire point by plate and the wire point by punches, and now the new wire points for punches option. So they've all been updated a little bit, or the first 2. So you've now got the ability to add multiple or 2 wire start positions for any profile. So if you want to put in more than one wire start position, you can do. You can independently manage multiple wire attributes on a single profile, and also the settings options have been added to manage functions and default parameters. So there's a new option now just at the bottom of the interface for making setting adjustments. And like I say, this data is passed to the wire CAM function, and it's also automatically all the start positions are automatically passed to the plot view as well. Okay, so let's look at some of these in action. So I've got 3 sets of geometry. So insert manager. So I'll start with a sheet body. You can see it automatically finds the holes within the geometry. It automatically creates a profile geometry around it. I can adjust it from the interface. I can now add in a name I can add in material information, specific weight, treatment. So I do this in one source, and then it can be passed to all the multiple models automatically. And if I then come and look at these within the assembly manager, you can see it's added all those values onto them, and also added in individual numbers onto each component. So if I run this again on a solid model, okay, so it starts, creates my profiles. If I can come in and I can edit them independently. So I can either group select or individually select for adjustment. So I can make adjustments from the interface, or I can come in and just by ticking the tick boxes at the bottom here, I can have on the screen sliders to be able to make individual adjustment to any inserts that get created, making it a much more user-friendly way of making adjustments. Okay, so the last option then really is to use this last piece of geometry. So that's the automatic result, but what I want to do is I don't want to use that. I want to use the profiles I've created. So I've created some profiles here and I want to use those to create the inserts. If I remove the automatic result, I'll just come and select the profiles. You can see it creates the inserts from the profile geometry that I've selected. So this is the wire point. So wire points for punches. So if I just window select, so it's very similar to the previous commands that we added. We can make adjustments individually, so the position, the size of the wire start holes, or we can do it from the interface, either for the individual punches or for a group selection, and do them all. So we can change the color, change the positions, sizes. So if I just position this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to position two holes in the same position, so it'll just give me a single wire start hole for creating two punches then. So if I just come into the cam settings, change the automatic recognition figures to look for circles. If I then come into the cam, run the recognition, okay, so there's the recognition. You can see it's found all the wire points ready for wiring. Okay, so just to show some of the additional settings within some of these wire point options. So you can see there I've got some holes and some profile pockets, so there's a tick box there just to include cylindrical holes or just to hide them out if you want to just put the holes in using a conventional manufacturing drilling. Or you can also put in additional start holes for a single profile, so you can have more than one hole or wire hole for a a pocket. So just to show the results in the plot view, so if I create a plot view, you can see that the holes are automatically linked to the view that I create. So the wire start holes are automatically added. And here, just to highlight the settings options, so you can set your default settings in here. You don't have to, if you use these functions a lot, you don't have to keep making adjustments. You can set the defaults to suit the way you like to work. Okay, you can see the profile colors are different and the sizes are different. Okay. Nesting. Okay, so we added nesting on a sheet in the last release. There's a new option to set the maximum quantity value for each part being nested on a sheet. We can fix the number of parts nested in a sheet by setting the same value for the minimum and maximum quantity values now. Let's just quickly show you this. So if I pick two components, so from the values on the interface, let's move those out of the way a little bit. So if I set a maximum there of say 25 and a maximum quantity here for 40, so it repositions the parts. So it's matched those figures that I wanted. I say a maximum there of 55. Now it can't physically get all those components in. It doesn't know what to prioritize. So if I change the minimum quantity now of 55, it forces the system to reorientate the part to match those figures that I've added. Okay, so moving on from the progress to the flow side of the system. So the flow side, we've done a lot of work on the holding phase and the warpage side of the calculations. So regarding the filling and holding algorithms, we've done a lot of enhancements with the main aim to increase the accuracy of the warpage calculations. So a lot of the changes you won't necessarily see unless you're using the shape calculations. These enhancements have then been validated using all our historical support cases where we've had reports of inaccurate results or poor results using the shape. So we've validated everything back through our historical parts. And we're seeing a lot more improved results using glass reinforced materials, which have been somewhat a problem. Linking with this, we've done a lot of work in the material database to achieve, again, more accurate results for the shape calculations. We've gone through the entire database testing all the material results, and we've also, following customer requests for new materials, we've been adding new materials, or you'll see new materials added into the database also. Right, I'm coming to the end now of my presentation, but just to cover a few things regarding the licensing. So with this release, there's an updated CLS license manager. So if you're running 2016 and 2017 on the same machine, you'll see in the icons bar at the bottom of your screen that you might have two CLS icons. So it's been updated, like I say, and this gives us a number of added options really. So within the 2017 we now support keyless and keyed licenses, so network licensing, and this is the management of profiles. So I'll cover this in a little more in just a second, but we can now support commuter licenses, rental options, and it now all supports the new price list. So for most people's use, this won't really affect you too much. But anybody who's using a network license, this will affect you, because you can now use the CLS licensing to control and set up your profiles, and you'll see a movie of this in action. It provides a bit more flexibility than it did before. So the setup for the user profiles is managed from the CLS interface. You can specify folders to hold your profiles. The profile selection list, it can be shown on startup. You can lock an individual system to open always with a specified single profile. It's a lot more easy to set up than it was in the previous system. So it's a lot easier for customers to set it up, or the way it works now is we could set up your profiles. If we know how you want it set up, we can set it up remotely here and then just send you the files that will control the profile distribution. So there's a number of ways of addressing this now, and the system works really well. So let's see this in action just to show you where some of the functions are. So I'll just start Visi. So that's it, starting without any profiles at all. So it just opens as you'd expect. So if I come down here, open up so here's the new network license profile manager. So you can see there's all the list, all the licenses available, but everything's grayed out at this point. So there's more than one position to open this. So if I come back in and say, actually I want to open up the license manager, you can see there's a new option in here as well. So configure network licenses. So if I open it from here, you'll basically get to the same location. So you need to tell the system you're going to use license profiles. So you need to set a location. So I'll set a location on my machine, and this can be anywhere. It could be on a server, it could be on an individual machine. You just need access to this folder. So I'll create a new folder. The path's in there. So what I need to do now is create some profiles. So if I move all the licenses over to the right hand window, so if I just move an individual license over for a viewer, so if I come down and say save as, this is going to be a profile that will only open the system as a viewer. So I call it viewer only. So if I add some more licenses, so if I add some CAD options, move these over, and if I create a new profile for this, so just change the name, use capitals, so let's add some functionality to this. Let's add mold analysis. What else can we add? Alright, solid modeling, mold design. Let's add all that. Alright, that'll do. So if we save that, mold only, mold design only even. Right. So there's my list of profiles. In fact, what I'll do is I'll add in one more, but I'll put all my licenses in. If I say all, and what I've got is current profile, I've got specified as all. So it'll ask for a profile list on startup, so if I accept that, if I then close the license manager, so next time I open Visi, you get the splash screen and you can see the list of profiles I've just created, and it'll open just using those licenses. Now, I've been using this for quite a while. I've had no issues with it, so it seems to be very robust. So one advantage now is we can easily copy profiles that have been created from system to system. So here's my normal, or here's the profiles I've just created. You can see they're just created in XML files. So I'm going to remove those, and I'm going to copy over the profiles I normally use. So I'll copy them from a different source off the server there. So I'll copy them and add them into the same source that I've just set up, so my network profile folder. So now when I come to open the system again, I'll just show you how you. So here's my profile list. Look, it looks straight away. You can see the profiles I've just added in. And if I come and open the system, you can see my profile list has changed. So it's a lot easier for us to be able to set it up here and then just send you the files you need to manage your profiles. Okay, so last couple of slides. This is really just to show another option within the drop-down list. So we've now got the ability to run TeamViewer from within Visi. So if you go and select your question mark drop-down menu, you'll see there's an option called Remote Support, and this will basically start TeamViewer for you remotely from or directly from Visi. You don't need any additional licenses for this. Just you might get a different result depending upon whether you already have TeamViewer installed or not. So if you don't have TeamViewer installed and you go and select this remote support option, what you'll get is a window that you can see there on the left hand side. So it has a nice Vero software graphics on it, but it gives you your ID number and your password, and those are the numbers we need then to remotely access your PC. Now if you already have TeamViewer installed, so I know some of you do, what you'll get is a different interface. So all you'll get is the interface there shown in the middle there where it says another instance of TeamViewer is already running. Now if you select OK at this point, it'll basically just close it down. It won't do anything. So what you'll need to do is select show the running TeamViewer, and it will give you a window then with your ID and password. So you can always, to save you searching then within your if you haven't already got an icon set up, it can be an easier way to fire up a TeamViewer to help us support you. And finally, just to highlight that we've been doing some work on the function help. This is the level we're at the moment. So if you press F1 for help, pretty much we're there 100% on most things. There's still a bit more to do on the modeling and a bit more to do on the machining functions. But yeah, we've just to highlight really that we've been doing a bit of work on the help screens as well. And that is it from me. So I'll say thank you very much for your attention.